Good morning, class. So today is going to be Chapter 8, Lifting and Moving Patients. Okay. EMS operations, knowledge of operational roles and responsibilities to ensure patient, public, and personal safety. In the course of a call, you will have to move patients to provide emergency medical care and transport. To move patients without injury, you need to learn the proper techniques. Knowledge of proper body mechanics and a power grip is important. Okay. So a picture of the ambulance, or excuse me, the ambulance stretcher or gurney that we carry. Can be also called ambulance stretcher or gurney, most commonly used device. We have power gurneys where you just hit a button that goes up or down. Some of you guys may have seen power gurneys, or excuse me, mechanical gurneys, where you're gonna have to lift up with both partners to lift the patient up. Okay, the wheeled ambulance stretcher weighs 40 to 145 pounds. Generally not taken up or downstairs or where the patient must be carried for any significant distance. So we also carry what's called a flat. It's kind of like a backboard type device that we put patients on if we have to carry patients downstairs that we can't sit them upright, as opposed to using a stair chair where it's more of like a wheelchair for patients. It's a little easier to get downstairs. It is pretty heavy. So it just kind of depends on your preference and how the patient is presenting. Okay. Moving a patient by rolling, using a stretcher or other wheeled device is preferred when the situation allows and helps prevent injuries from carrying. A number of models are available. Before going on a call, familiarize yourself with the specific features of the stretcher your ambulance carries. So we carry striker gurneys. So anything red that is shown on the gurney operates something. So know which red button or lever or handle you are touching and know how it works before you touch it, especially when you have a patient on the gurney already. Okay. General features: head end and foot end. Strong metal frame to which all other parts are attached. Hinges at center allow for elevation of head and back. And guardrails prevent the patient from rolling out. Okay. Sometimes it depends. The guardrails may go up or down or kind of off to the side a little bit. So some patients are bigger than others, obviously. So you would have to use guardrails to prevent the patient from rolling out. Okay. General features: undercarriage frame allows adjustment to any height. Mattresses must be fluid resistant. The patient is secured with straps to help protect the patient from further injury. Okay. Long, flat, and made of rigid rectangular material, mostly plastic. So backboards. Anybody who has a back injury or traumatic injury is most likely going to be placed on a backboard. They're used to carry and immobilize patients with suspected spinal injury or other trauma. So know your protocols. Know when it's necessary to backboard a patient. Know when it's not necessary to backboard a patient. There are some conditions where you won't be able to backboard a patient. Due to any back injuries, kyphosis or lordosis for the older patients who already have curved spines, and it's going to be hard for them to lay flat. Okay. Commonly used for patients found lying down. Used to move patients out of awkward places. Approximately 6 to 7 feet long. Holes serve as handles and as a place to secure straps. When you move a patient, take care that injury does not occur to you, to your team, to the patient. Patient lifting and moving are technical skills that require repeated training and practice. So one of the main rules about moving a patient when lifting is always use your legs. Don't use your back. Okay, don't bend your back. Okay. Many EMTs are injured lifting and moving patients, most likely because they practice poor body mechanics. Okay. Using proper body mechanics and maintaining physical fitness greatly reduce the chance of injury. Okay. So small picture of the anatomy review. Okay. So lifting position: shoulder girdle should be aligned over pelvis. Hands should be held close to legs. Force then goes essentially straight down spinal column. Very little strain occurs. So you want to get as close as you can to whatever you're lifting. This is the correct way to lift. So as you lift up in conjunction with your partner, you want to make sure you lift up with your legs. Okay. I would probably get down a little lower using my legs than in this picture. Okay. You may injure your back if you lift while leaning forward. If you lift with your back straight but bent significantly forward at the hips. Okay. So here, both EMTs or paramedics are bending over. So when they pick up the patient, they're going to be using their back. You have to protect your back out in this field because there is a lot of injuries that people don't come back from, especially with back injuries. So know the proper mechanics when lifting. Lifting technique. Legs should be spread about 15 inches apart, shoulder width. So get a good base when you're about to lift a patient, especially the heavier ones. Okay. Place feet so the center of gravity is balanced. With your back held upright, bring your upper body down by bending the legs. Grasp the patient or stretcher. Okay. Lift the patient by raising your upper body and arms and straightening your legs until standing. Keep the weight close to your body. Keep your arms the same distance apart. Okay. The power grip gets maximum force from the hands. Palms up. Hands about 10 inches apart, all fingers at same angle, fully support handle on curved palm. Okay. And when directly lifting a patient, tightly grip the patient in a place and manner that will ensure that you will not lose your grasp on the patient. Okay. If you start to lose your grasp on a patient, you got to let your partner know. You got to tell them, I'm losing my grasp. And we got to put the patient down for a second because patients have been dropped before. And it's not a pretty sight when you're dropping patients in front of family members. All right, body drag. The same body mechanics and principles apply to moving, lifting, and carrying a patient. Keep your back locked by tightening your abdominal muscles. Kneel. Extend your arms no more than 15 to 20 inches in front of you. Alternate between pulling the patient by flexing your arms and repositioning yourself. Okay. So just a couple more pictures on what the easiest way to carry a patient. So they both have their arms underneath their shoulders or in the armpit of the patient, as well as grabbing the belt. This is another great way to help lift a patient who's maybe unconscious, is by grabbing their belt. Okay. Drag a patient across the bed. Kneel on the bed to avoid reaching beyond the recommended distance. Drag the patient to within 15 to 20 inches. Complete the drag while standing at the side of the bed. Use the sheet or blanket under the patient rather than dragging the patient by his or her clothing. So you always want to make sure that there's a sheet or blanket underneath the patient or on the gurney. So say if you have to actually carry the patient, you want to make sure there's a sheet or the blanket on the gurney because that's going to help you sheet or drag the patient over when you transfer the patient to the hospital. And also make it a lot easier to transfer a patient. Okay. In the hospital, transfer the patient from the stretcher to a bed with a body drag. The stretcher should be the same height or slightly higher than the bed. You and a partner should kneel on the bed and drag in increments. So heavier patients, you might want to only drag in small doses. This will help prevent injury as well. Okay. Log roll the patient onto his or her side to place the patient on the backboard. And also, what's the number one thing when you want to log roll a patient? The person at the head calls out the commands, as well as checking the back, checking the spine for any injuries. Okay. Kneel as close to the patient's side as possible. Keep your back straight and lean slowly from the hips. Roll the patient without stopping until the patient is resting on his or her side and braced against your thighs. Pulling toward you allows your legs to prevent the patient from rolling over completely. Whenever possible, use a device that can be rolled. When a wheeled device is not available, make sure that you understand and follow the guidelines for carrying a patient on a stretcher. Okay. Patient weight. Estimate the patient's weight before lifting. Adults often weigh 120 to 200 pounds. 2 EMTs should be able to safely lift this weight. Try to use 4 providers to lift when possible. More stability requires less strength. Okay. Especially when going downstairs or you have a patient on the second floor of an apartment. Try and use 4 providers when necessary. You could always ask fire to 4-point it, or 2 people at the head and 2 people at the feet, because it can get heavy and can get awkward if you're only using 2 people. Okay. Do not attempt to lift a patient who weighs more than 250 pounds with fewer than 4 providers. Know the weight limitations of the equipment and how to handle patients who exceed the weight limitations. So sometimes for bigger patients, we have what are called bariatric gurneys, and they handle the bigger patients. And you have to know how much your gurney can hold before you put that patient on. And most likely the patient's not going to be able to fit with the guardrails up. So make sure you know your bariatric limits, and if you guys carry a bariatric gurney. Yeah. Lifting and carrying a patient on backboard or stretcher. More of the patient's weight rests on the head half of the device than on the foot half. The diamond carry and the one-handed carry use one EMT at the head and the foot, and one on each side of the patient's torso. Okay, so this is an example of the diamond carry. So we don't use this too much for the most part. When we call a 4-point carry, we have 2 people down at the bottom and then 2 people up at the top. Okay. Lifting and carrying a patient on backboard or stretcher. Use 4 providers, 1 provider at each corner of the stretcher to provide an even lift. When rolling the wheeled ambulance stretcher, make sure that it is in the fully elevated position. Your partner should control the head end and assist you by pushing with his or her arms held with the elbows bent. So when you have somebody in the fully elevated position on the stretcher, it's important to remember these gurneys are top heavy. Those things will tip over pretty easily. So if you're going down a driveway or going down a steep hill, it might be easier for you to lower the gurney to provide more stability. And you could also use more providers to hold on to the sides of the gurney to make sure it doesn't tip over. Moving a patient with a stair chair. So as you can see over here on the right, the stair chair, it is pretty heavy. So if you guys could see, everything red on the stair chair is a handle or lever that does some type of function. So make sure you know which type of function it uses or it does before you put a patient on there, because you could injure yourself or the patient. Okay. Use a stair chair to carry a conscious patient up or down a flight of stairs. This lightweight wheeled folding chair has a molded seat, adjustable safety straps, and fold-out handles at both the head and feet. Okay. Moving a patient on stairs with a stretcher. Backboard should be used instead for a patient who is unresponsive, who must be moved in a supine position, who must be immobilized. So the power gurneys that we have, they are pretty heavy just due to all the mechanics and the battery charger and everything else. It's going to add another 30 or 40 pounds on your patient. So like I said, you could either use what we carry is called a flat, or a backboard, or even a stair chair. Okay. So a backboard should be used instead for a patient who is unresponsive, who must be moved in a supine position, or who must be immobilized. Okay. Moving a patient on stairs with a stretcher. Carry the patient on the backboard down to the prepared stretcher. Place the strongest EMTs at the head and foot ends, with the taller person at the foot end. Place both the backboard and the patient on the stretcher. Secure both to the stretcher with additional straps. Okay. Loading a wheeled stretcher into an ambulance. Ensure the frame is held between 2 hands so it does not tip. Okay. So anytime you guys are using a stretcher, always keep both hands on the gurney. Okay. They say 3 points of contact. So the guy at the back is going to have 2 hands, and the girl at the front might have a handle, or so she could help guide the gurney. But it is important to try and have 2 hands at all times so that the gurney doesn't tip with the patient in it. Okay. Loading a wheeled stretcher into an ambulance. Newer models are self-loading, allowing you to push the stretcher into the ambulance. Other models need to be lowered and lifted to the height of the floor of the ambulance. Clamps in the ambulance hold the stretcher in place. Okay. Team actions must be coordinated. Team leader indicates where each member should be Sorry about that, class. So team actions must be coordinated. Team leader indicates where each team member should be. Rapidly describes a sequence of steps to perform before lifting. So make sure you know where you are. Make sure that everyone's lifting at the same time, because you could injure yourself or your teammate. Okay. Preparatory commands are used. Example, team leader says, all ready to stop. To get the team's attention, team leader says stop in a louder voice. Countdowns are also used. So if I'm lifting up a patient and I'm looking at my partner, I'm giving them direct eye contact and I'm telling them, okay, are you ready? 1, 2, 3, and then lift. Okay. Especially when you're lifting a heavier patient, you have a 4 points of contact, or you're using 4 providers to lift. Okay. Carefully plan ahead. Select the methods that will involve the least amount of lifting and carrying. Consider whether there is an option that will cause less strain. So, and just make sure the gurney's ready ahead of time. Make sure that all the straps and the seatbelts are off, the guardrails are put down, the brake is on the gurney, and that it's closest to the bottom of the stairway or the bottom of the house. So it involves less carrying. Okay. Emergency moves, used when there is a potential for danger, fire, explosives, hazardous materials. Used when you cannot properly assess a patient or provide immediate care because of the patient's location or position. So this occurs in very rare instances. Say we have a vehicle accident on the side of the highway, and all of a sudden the car starts to smoke and the car starts to fire. So for the safety of the patient and yourself and the crews, you're going to move that patient as fast as you can. Okay, and that's what emergency move is. Okay, if you are alone, you use a drag to pull the patient along the long axis of the body. Use techniques to help prevent aggravation of patient's spinal injury. Close drag, blanket drag, arm to arm drag. So just different types of clothing techniques. Blanket drag might be the safest way to carry a patient. Okay, so up in the top right corner is gonna be a blanket drag. Most likely, you're probably not gonna be able to just roll a patient and put a blanket underneath them if it's gonna be an emergency move, because it's gonna be something that's immediate danger area. So what we normally do when we do have to move somebody or even carry somebody is the bottom right. And I would crisscross my arms with the patient's arms. So that way it gives you a little more stability. And say if you move around a little bit, the patient's not moving from side to side. Okay. To remove an unconscious patient from a vehicle alone, move the patient's legs clear of the pedals, rotate the patient so the back is toward the open car door, place your arms through the armpits and support the head against your body. Drag the patient from the seat to a safe location. Okay. So this is another one, bottom right. A visualization that we just showed you. So that's probably going to be the easiest and most stable way to carry a patient for you guys. So hands underneath the armpits, arms across the chest. I would grab their wrists. So I would grab her left wrist with my right hand, and my left hand will grab her right wrist when carrying her out. Okay. So urgent moves, necessary to move a patient with altered level of consciousness with inadequate ventilation and shock in extreme weather conditions. The rapid extrication technique requires a team of knowledgeable EMTs. So this is different than an emergency move. Say a patient's in extremis or a serious medical condition that you guys don't have room for. She's in the back corner of her bedroom, or she's in the closet in the corner, and you guys can't get to her. You guys can't do a full assessment. You guys are gonna have to move her out to the hallway or to the middle of a living room or something like that. Okay. So when we have a full arrest, we normally bring a patient out to the area where there's the most room for us to work, because there's so much going on and we're going to be using so many supplies and tools that we need an open area. Okay. So rapid extrication techniques should be used only if urgency exists. The patient can be moved within 1 minute. This technique increases the risk of damage if the patient has a spinal injury. Look at all options before using an urgent move. Okay. Non-urgent moves. Used when both the scene and the patient are stable. Carefully plan to move the patient. Team leaders should plan the move. Personnel, obstacles identified, equipment, procedure, and path. So I had a pregnancy last week. Patient said that her water broke and she's not going to be able to sit upright. And she was on the second floor of an apartment complex. So we grabbed the flat. She had no head, neck, or back pain. It wasn't a traumatic injury. So we put her on the flat. We made sure the gurney was down at the bottom of the stairs by the apartment complex. And we moved her down that way. And we 4-pointed it. Okay. And we made sure to coordinate our moves before we lifted to make sure everyone was on the same page. And we knew if we were going to go head first or feet first out of the doorway. Okay. And when you're moving a patient downstairs, your feet will always go first. Okay. Choose between direct ground lift for patients with no suspected spinal injuries who are supine, patients who need to be carried over some distance. EMTs stand side by side to lift and carry the patients. Okay. Extremity lift for those patients with no suspected spinal injury who are supine and sitting. Helpful when the patient is in a small space. One EMT is at the patient's head and another at the patient's feet. Coordinate moves verbally. Transfer moves. Direct carry. Move supine patient from bed to stretcher using a direct carry method. Draw sheet method. Move patient from bed to stretcher using a sheet or blanket. So this is what I was talking about earlier. So say if a patient's on a bed, you go to a skilled nursing facility, they're going to usually be under some type of sheet, some type of blanket. And it's easier to carry a patient like that. Just drag her across the bed to your gurney or a scoop stretcher. Scoop stretcher is similar to a flat. Okay. Geriatrics. Most patients transported by EMS are geriatric patients. Skeletal changes may cause brittle bones, rigidity, and spinal curvatures that present special challenges. Allay the patient's fears with a sympathetic and compassionate approach. So another thing I was talking about was the spinal curvatures with older patients. They might not be able to lay down flat. If they have a traumatic injury, you have to do what's called modified C-spine. You may have to pack some blankets or pillows around the patient's back to make it a little easier for them. Okay. So these are a couple of conditions that's going to make it hard for you to put a geriatric flat on a backboard. Okay, bariatrics refers to management of obesity. 76 million U.S. adults are obese. 30 to 40% of adults are obese. Approximately 17% of children are obese. Back injuries account for the largest number of missed days of work. So knowing proper body mechanics is going to help you stay injury-free. Back injury is one of the most common, if not the injury that people sustain in our field. And some people don't ever come back to work because of back injuries. So always know how to lift and use proper body mechanics. Okay. Stretchers and equipment are being produced with higher capacities. Does not address danger to users of that equipment. Mechanical ambulance lifts are uncommon in the United States. So the picture of a bariatric gurney. Bariatric stretcher is specialized for overweight or obese patients. Wider wheelbase for increased stability. So looks like a normal stretcher from this picture, but it's a little wider and the weight limit's a little bit bigger. And so you have two big handles on both sides. Okay. And then if you could see right here, the red, okay? So that's going to put the guardrail down. Okay. So right here, it's kind of hard to see. That's going to help lower or lift up the undercarriage. Okay, so the red back here is going to actually collapse this so it goes down right here. So if you guys are in a tight hallway or tight elevator, it's going to make the gurney a little bit smaller, a little easier to get in and maneuver. So this is red right here. That's the brake for the wheel. Okay. So, and I believe this right here is a handle that pulls out a little bit. So you have 4 people. So you got one over here, and then one on either side. Okay. So some have a tow package with a winch, rated to hold 850 to 900 pounds. Regular stretcher rated for 650 pounds maximum. Most likely anybody over about 350 to 400 pounds is probably not going to fit in a regular stretcher, or you're not going to be able to get the guardrails up. Okay. Pneumatic and electronic powered wheeled stretchers. Battery operated with electronic controls to raise, lower the undercarriage. Increases the weight of the stretcher. Hazardous and uneven terrain. So this is an electric powered gurney that we carry. So on the other side are going to be 2 buttons, two up top, and then you're going to have another 2 just down below on a smaller handle. And it's basically plus or minus. So plus goes up and minus goes down. Okay. So these, like I said earlier, these also increase the weight of the stretcher. So if you're going to try and put a patient on there and carry the gurney, you're going to add even more weight to yourself. So that's another thing to be careful of. Okay. Portable folding stretchers, strong rectangular tubular metal frame with fabric stretched across it. Okay. So if you guys ever watch soccer, okay, they bring these out for the players. Okay. This is typical to kind of what we carry. We call it a flat, but it's got almost circular frame at the end, so it's a little easier for us to carry, because when they bring these out on the soccer field, there's going to be 4 providers, okay, carrying at each base. Sometimes we don't have 4 providers on scene that we're just going to have to carry between me and my partner. Okay, so portable folding stretchers. Some models have 2 wheels. Some can be folded in half, used in difficult to reach areas, weigh less than wheeled stretchers. Okay. Flexible stretchers, excellent for storage and carrying, conform around the patient's sides, useful for confined spaces, uncomfortable but provides support and immobilization. So this is flexible stretcher, sometimes called a Stokes basket. These are used for any type of a rescue off the mountain or a water rescue. Yeah, it's hard for a patient, for EMT personnel to get down to close to the patient that they're going to have to bring up. Okay. So short backboards used to mobilize seated patients. Example, the KED vest type device. So this is basically just going to go up your upper torso from your hips all the way up to your back, and then your back pad, or excuse me, your head pad. Okay. We don't really use these too much in the field, but we do carry them. Okay. Vacuum mattresses, alternative to backboards for mobilizing geriatric and pediatric patients. Air is removed from the device, allowing it to mold around the patient. Provides mobilization, comfort, and thermal insulation. So we also have vacuum splints. We don't carry them in this county, but there are some agencies that do. So they basically conform to the patient's injury and makes it a little nicer for a patient, get a little bit more padding into their broken extremity. Okay. Basket stretchers. Rigid stretcher, also called a Stokes litter, used for patient removal in remote locations, including in water rescues and technical rope rescues. So this is going to be your Stokes basket right here, actually. Okay. This makes it a little easier to get a patient out. Okay. Basket stretchers. If the patient has a spinal injury, secure the patient to a backboard and place it inside the basket stretcher to carry the patient out of the location. When you return to an ambulance, lift the backboard out of the basket stretcher and place it into onto the wheeled stretcher. So if the patient, say he fell down the side of the mountain 100 feet and he's got a spinal cord injury, you're going to place the patient on a backboard before you put him on here. Okay. And then this is actually long enough where you could fit a backboard in. Okay. So this is your scoop stretcher. They break apart at the feet and the head. So this is kind of similar to a flat. Splits into 2 or 4 pieces. Pieces fit around the patient who's lying flat on a flat surface and then reconnect. Both sides of the patient must be accessible. The patient must be stabilized and secured on a scoop stretcher. Okay. Neonatal isolette, sometimes called an incubator. Neonates cannot be transported on a wheeled stretcher. The isolette keeps the neonate warm and protects the child from noise, draft, infection, and excess handling. The isolette may be secured to a wheeled ambulance stretcher for freestanding. Okay. Decontaminate equipment after use. This should be done after every call, no matter who was on the gurney. Okay. For your safety of the crew, for your safety of the patient, to prevent the spread of disease. Okay. So after every call, it is important to wipe down the gurney, wipe down the seatbelts, anything that you normally touch, the guardrails, the handles, the seat in the back, the handles on the ambulance. Proper position depends on the chief complaint. Patients with head injury, shock, spinal injury, pregnancy, and obese patients need special lifting and moving techniques. Patient reporting chest pain and respiratory distress should be placed in a position of comfort, typically a Fowler or semi-Fowler position. Patients in shock should be placed in supine. Okay, patients in late stages of pregnancy should be positioned and transported on their left side. So the main reason for this is they have so much fluid in their stomach that if you place them supine, it's going to push up on the inferior vena cava, a big artery in their body, and it's going to cut off blood, and it's going to make them pass out. So always in a third stage of pregnancy, you're going to place the patient on the left side. Okay. An unresponsive patient with no suspected spinal injury should be placed in the recovery position. So the recovery position is on your side with your the side that you were laying on with your arm all the way up, and then your other hand just underneath your mouth. Okay. A patient who's nauseated or vomiting should be transported in a position of comfort. Obese patients should be positioned the same as other patients with a similar condition. Okay. Medical restraints. Evaluate for correctable causes of combativeness. Head injury, hypoxia, hypoglycemia. Follow local protocols. Restraint requires 5 personnel. Restrain the patient in a supine position. Positional asphyxia may develop in the prone position. Okay. So before you go straight to medical restraints, understand the patient's medical condition and see if there's a reason for their combativeness before you go straight to restraints. Know your local protocols. Make sure you understand them. Okay. Apply a restraint to each extremity. Okay. So in our county, we don't have protocols from the county, but we do have protocols from our company that says any 5150 needs to be put in restraints due to our safety and their safety. Okay. So assess ABCs, mental status and distal circulation after restraints are applied. Document all information. So before and after each restraint is applied, you check CSM in each extremity. Okay. Personnel considerations. Questions to ask before moving a patient. Am I physically strong enough to move this patient? Is there adequate room to get the proper stance to lift the patient? Do I need additional personnel for lifting assistance? Injured EMTs cannot help anyone. Okay. So always make sure that I know it's hard, but if you don't think you could lift a patient, you could always ask for help. Okay. Okay. What is the first rule of lifting? Okay. B, the first rule of lifting is always keep your back in a straight, upright position and use the powerful muscles of your thighs. Never twist while lifting. Okay. So always use your legs. Bend down, squat down, and when you're lifting, use your legs. Don't ever twist while lifting. This causes a back injury. Okay. Okay. Don't bend at your waist either. Your back should be upright position. Okay. When lifting a stretcher using the power lift, you should when lifting any heavy object, your hands should be facing palms up. This provides better lifting power and is not as stressful on the wrist. Okay. So we just went over the question 1, bend at the hips. Don't bend at your hips. Bend at your knees. Okay. And don't bend at your waist either. Okay. So it is impractical to apply a vest-type extrication device on a critically injured patient to remove him or her from a wrecked vehicle because it it takes several minutes to correctly apply a vest-type extrication device. This is too much time to waste when treating a critically ill patient. A long backboard would be more appropriate. Vest-type immobilization devices, when applied correctly, provide adequate spinal stabilization and are ideal to use in stable patients who need to be removed from their vehicle. It is impractical. So proper guidelines for correct reaching include all of the following except okay, so you don't want to twist your back when lifting, and you want to keep anything that you're lifting close, right? Okay. So when reaching, you should keep your back in a locked position and avoid twisting or hyperextending your back. Do not reach more than 15 to 20 inches in front of your body. Okay. An injured hang glider is trapped at the top of a large mountain and must be evacuated to the ground. The terrain is very rough and uneven. Which of the following devices would be the safest and most appropriate to use? So you're not going to use a stair chair to wheel a patient down the side of a mountain. You're probably not going to carry somebody on a long backboard all the way down the side of a mountain either. Okay, so a basket stretcher, also called a Stokes basket, should be used to carry patients over rough or uneven terrain that is inaccessible by ambulance. It's closed-ended and sides protect the patient from falling out of the device. Okay, when 2 EMTs are lifting a patient on a long backboard, they should So where is the heaviest part of a patient normally when you're lifting a patient on a backboard or a Stokes basket? Most likely in their upper body, correct? So you want to position the strongest EMT at the head of the board, D. Since more than half the patient's weight is distributed towards the head end of a backboard or stretcher, you should always ensure that the strongest EMT is at that position. This is going to reduce the risk of injury to less strong personnel as well as the risk of dropping the patient. Okay. Which of the following techniques is considered to be an emergency move? So C, firefighter's drag is one person technique that is used when a patient must be removed from a life-threatening situation immediately. So a firefighter's drag is underneath the armpits and grabbing the patient's wrist. Okay, that's a technique I showed you that I like to use when I'm carrying a patient. Right? To extract a patient from the basement of a building, you must transport the patient up a flight of stairs. In doing this, you must ensure that A. When you carry a patient upstairs or up an incline, you must ensure that the elevated head of the backboard or stretcher goes first. This will help to equally distribute the weight. Okay. So you also got to be careful too for the patient at the bottom of the stairs. You should have what we call a backer. You should have someone telling you how many steps are left and anything to watch out for. And also, because if you lose your balance with the patient, it's more for safety issue for you and the patient and your teammate. Okay. If an injured patient needs to be moved but is not in immediate danger from fire or building collapse, you should first B. The only time your attention should be directed away from the primary assessment of the patient is when the patient's life or your life is in immediate danger. Okay, so number 1 rule, patient's airway, breathing, circulation, ABCs, right? Patient doesn't have an airway, it's not a good sign. Okay. The rapid extrication technique is a Okay, so I gave you guys an example earlier. So we have a vehicle accident on the side of the road. You start to see smoke, and then a fire starts. So the fastest way to get somebody out is using the rapid extrication technique. Okay, D. With the rapid extrication technique, a seriously injured patient can be moved from a sitting position in a vehicle to a supine position on a backboard while protecting the spine at the same time.